At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Quiet Riot. Hello, and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the teaspoon to the ladle that is our Thursday main show. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I'm Naomi.
And I'm Alex. Now, before we begin, we wanted to just briefly take a moment to say that our thoughts are with all those affected by the devastating earthquake in Myanmar. It is a kind of reminder that everything can change in an instant and lives can be turned upside down, and also how urgent coordinated international support efforts are in times like these.
Indeed, and I think we should leave a link in the show notes, Alex. I've donated to the UNICEF appeal to help children left destitute by the quake, and we can pop a link in the show notes to that if anyone else would like to help. Alex, other than that really devastating news, and it's Thailand and other countries as well, not just Myanmar, how are you? I ask because I wasn't sure that I could have enjoyed anything more than episode 1 of Podyssey. But then episode 2 came along and it was equally beautiful and even made me cry. I know you're working very hard on the 3rd episode. Can you please try and make us laugh in the next one?
And you cry at nothing. Yeah, I mean, the aim is actually, it is a lighter story.
Oh, lovely.
Whether I managed to get it out, I don't know, because it is a monster episode. And so my poor computer is quite literally struggling with the size of the live file and moving things around and having to having to move bits of it to an external drive.
Oh,
And honestly, it's been a nightmare. I've been up all night. I have not had a minute of sleep.
Oh, darling.
So, that's all right.
Well, look, you on no sleep is still better than everybody else, I think, on hours and hours of sleep. So we've got two.
Let's see. Let's see.
We've got 2 big topics to get stuck into. First up, and as we promised on the main show with Vicky Price, the impact assessments of Rachel Reeves' spring statement, particularly on welfare reform. We'll get into what these changes really mean for those on benefits.
And second, we'll look at the UK's failure, at least so far, to secure an exemption from Trump's tariffs. I know they're still negotiating, but it is time to start asking, will we be left out in the cold? And what happens next if we are? So we hope that you enjoy the show.
Quiet Riot.
Now, the spring statement outlined a raft of changes to the welfare system, some of which have sparked significant debate. We now know that personal independence payments, PIP, assessments, they will be made stricter, requiring claimants to score at least 4 points in one activity category to qualify. And if you don't know what that is, we'll get into it. Work capability assessments will be reinstated from April 2026. The plan was to remove them. The universal credit health element will be reduced for new claimants from April 2026, so more than a year from now, but also frozen for existing recipients until the end of this parliament, effectively 29/30. The universal credit standard allowance will see above inflation increases, eventually reaching a sort of CPI, consumer price index, plus 5% from 2029. And fraud and error prevention checks are being expanded. So the government published its impact assessments alongside the spring statement, and their own figures forecast that by 2029-30, 3.2 million families, households I should say, will suffer an average financial loss of £1,720 a year. For example, people who are no longer eligible for the personal independence payments as a result of the changes will lose 4,500 on average, according to the assessment. So obviously this won't fall evenly and equally across the board. Naomi, there are some progressive elements here, notably the right to try, but clearly the measures tighten welfare spending significantly. I mainly have questions, I'm afraid. I know you have experience in this area, but I find the entire thing so Kafkaesque. Like which elements are linked to diagnosis and which to ability, which elements are means tested and which are not, which elements are tax exempt and which are not, what are the bolt-ons, like it's a full-time job just getting the stuff you're entitled to, it feels like. So what's your take?
You are asking all of the right questions, Alex. And I'm afraid we don't know the answers, which in itself is sociopathic. The published assessments don't shed anywhere near enough light yet on exactly what the impact will be for many welfare recipients. I have family members who receive different elements of PIP and ESA, which is going to be abolished and rolled into PIP, I think. And we have been over and over them and are still none the wiser about whether the changes will impact them or just new applicants, and whether the changes, if they do affect them, will take effect this year or at some point in the future. And we won't be alone. There will be thousands of families across the country left now in a state of anxiety, unable to find the answer within the impact assessments that they're looking for, waiting for some undisclosed point in time when they might find out. And when I say that we've been through them, I'm a currently healthy, non-disabled, non-sick person going through them with a high level of education. So if you are ill, if you are cognitively impaired, I can only imagine just how extra terrifying trying to get your head around all of this really is. So I'm afraid you have the right questions, and they are exactly the reasonable and correct questions that should be being asked. It's quite clear at the moment that the government either hasn't got those answers or isn't telling us the answers just yet.
Okay, let's rewind a little bit. The system seems to me dysfunctional. That's just my impression of it. Like I said, all those different elements, bolt-ons, it seems basically designed to be a maze. That says to me that reform is needed.
Of course.
What is the better way to do reform here? What would have been the kind, humane, dare I say, Labour way to do this?
Well, that's an excellent question. And there will be people that will comment saying universal basic income, and that is a whole other thing that we could and probably ought to do a bespoke episode on. You got it on the nose a few weeks ago, and you quite rightly pointed out on the main show that welfare reforms done properly cost a lot of money up front in order to get savings in the longer term. And forgetting the kind of means testing versus non-means tested split in the benefit system, what we don't have is a system flexible enough for the very different types of mobility, ability, disability that exist within those who require state support. So it's a very inflexible binary choice system. And if we were to be reforming, the kind, compassionate, progressive, dare I say it, as you mentioned, socialist Labour way to do it would be to have a system that allows for the complex needs of disability and dynamic disability, and the fact that you can become better and iller over time, and therefore your requirements change and can change overnight. What seems to be happening here, though, is that while there might be some simplification, the cost of that is coming from raising of the threshold to meet any of the requirements to get support. And that is what is going to really devastate those most in need. People who maybe only just qualified previously, not because they were only just sick enough, but because the system is designed against them, are now highly unlikely to meet the new higher threshold. And that leaves them destitute. I mean, I can't, overemphasize that enough. We've had some excellent work done by various brilliant organizations that have been looking into this. Resolution Foundation warning that 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, will be pushed into relative poverty. IPPR saying that it poses significant risks, undermining essential public services, exacerbating child poverty. And what they're saying is that focusing solely on immediate fiscal savings rather than comprehensive reforms aimed at boosting employment and supporting disabled individuals is going to have some really detrimental long-term effects. And Child Poverty Action Group, saying very much the same thing, that the reductions in disability benefit are going to undermine government efforts to tackle child poverty. But I think the Joseph Rowntree Foundation probably sort of got to the nub of it most, because they highlight that the government's own assessment indicates cuts will deepen hardship, and argue that the burden of fiscal adjustment is going to fall disproportionately on those already facing significant challenges. So again, I'm not sure that I'm directly answering your question, other to say that what the government is proposing certainly isn't it.
I mean, you are answering my question in a way, because yes, it's by prescribing what not to do that we get a general shape of what it is you do need to do. We have said there is a need for reform. I think there is also a public perception issue, right?
Yeah.
It's human nature, and I can speak for myself here, it's not a monstrous thing, and we mustn't classify it as such. But the truth is, I probably know 10 people who claim some sort of benefit that we've discussed, right?
That isn't state pension,
That isn't state pension.
Yeah.
I probably know 10 people who do claim one of these benefits, but only know about 3 of them that they do that, right?
Yeah.
Because most people tend to keep their health condition and their financial situation private.
Yeah.
So I will only be seeing a fraction of the people who are affected by these cuts.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And among those people, I will probably in my head be ignoring, let's say, the people who I think are genuinely ill. And I will be focusing on the one person I know that, I have a fairly good idea is manipulating the system and has been for years.
Right.
Not in a I'm pretending I'm ill sort of way, but, there are people who acquire the knowledge simply by being in the benefit system for such a long time and having sort of family support that is also in that system for a long time. They share tips. They know how to fill in these forms better than you or I would, right? If I had a serious health condition tomorrow, I
You'd
would
go
be
to them.
lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would go to this person that, that I think everyone knows someone like that could tell you these are the key words to mention that will result in quick and positive results. And so is there a perception out there that the system is being taken advantage of?
I think what that then feeds into is the narrative, particularly from the right, about the rise of the sickfluencer, the YouTube accounts that give videos on how to handle your assessment and how to fill out forms, and just to the overall sort of culture war argument of scroungers, that there are people on the make, lazy, idle, and it's your taxes that are funding their lifestyle, sat at home with their big satellite TV dish and, packet of fags on the go and, expensive shoes on their feet. And the reality is, and the government has now published this, is that 1 million families with some disability in the household are going to lose out. 96% of all those affected, representing 1 in 5 of all families with a disabled person in the household. The reality is very, very stark. And 58% of new PIP claimants and 52% of PIP award reviews do not score any 4-point daily living descriptors, which is the new threshold. You have to get 4 points. So on the face of it, it's going to reduce the number of people getting PIP, the daily living portion of PIP, by 1.5 million, virtually a third. So as you say, for every one of the 20-odd people who may be getting slightly more than one could reasonably argue they shouldn't, the vast majority of them probably already need more than they're getting, and they're now going to get even less.
I'm not sure that I was suggesting they're getting more than they should be. I guess what I'm saying is that I know people who basically have, because of the length of time of whatever condition they've been battling with, made a conscious decision, accepted some time ago that they will never work again, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Even though the workplace is changing, and actually the treatment for many of their conditions is changing. I know, for instance, people who are HIV positive who, went on long-term disability when the combination drugs that they had to take were devastating to someone's everyday health, but are now on combination drugs which mean they're quite healthy and they're undetectable. And yet that attitude that I will never work again remains, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Is that, am I being harsh? Am I being a bit of a dick?
I'll let those people speak for themselves. As we've said, it is right that those who want to be able to work are offered a route to that means that they are not financially worse off. What I know is that from my own experience of somebody who was incredibly healthy and then became sick at the peak of their career in such a way that means that they cannot work. I mean, they can barely go to the shops and back, let alone hold down a job. They want nothing more than to have their life back. And the second they were able to feel better because of some treatment or therapy or cure, they would bite your hand off for it to be able to go back to work and resume a fulfilling life and make more of a contribution to society than they feel they can at the moment, and to have that independence back and the dignity that comes with it and the mental health positives that come from feeling valued and going out and meeting people and making friends and working. So I, from my own experience, just simply don't know anyone who has become ill who would rather not be and be back at work. So yes, illnesses change, treatments change, things can improve for people, and let's hope there is far more of that. But I personally really don't know people who wouldn't want to immediately get their old life back in that kind of situation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I just wanted to, kick it around because I know that these are things that will be going through people's heads.
Quiet Riot. Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, onabotulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Quiet riot. One of the things I want to move us on to is the politics of it, because whatever the final figures, end up being, the cuts currently represent a really unprecedented attack on disabled people in the UK that many Labour MPs are desperate to avoid taking responsibility for. And perhaps within the next month or two, we'll have to start trooping through the division lobbies to show, support or otherwise for a policy that is going to be impoverishing disabled families in their seats. We've heard an increasing number of backbenchers speaking up about it, either on their own social media or in the press themselves. I'm still not sensing that the rebellion is going to be anywhere more than a few dozen. Can you see that changing over the course of the next couple of months?
I can see it changing the opposite way, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
So I can see the government giving way on, criticism that they think is justified. I can see them backpedaling on some of the things that really do seem baffling, irrational, and designed to be cruel, because I think they've been slightly surprised by the unity of reaction, I think, by the media.
Yeah. Well, the devastating front pages on the day after the Spring Statement, from the Mirror to the Telegraph.
And I don't think they saw that coming, Naomi. I think they thought they were going to get skewered by the Guardian and the Mirror, but get a pat on the back from the Mail and the Telegraph, and they just didn't.
No, the only one that kept quiet was the Time.
I think that will have been a little bit of a wake-up call. I also think it's a matter of distribution, and I've seen some of the criticism coming from backbenchers, and I think some of it is justified and some of it is unreasonable and shrill. And what do I mean by that? I think you are not just allowed, but obliged to raise the devastating impact this will have on the lives of people who rely on these payments, right? But I think to then go on and say, this is austerity 2.0, they're just like the Tories, all the usual stuff. To be honest, I think it's ludicrous. 6 months ago, Rachel Reeves announced a program that boosted spending on public services by 70 billion quid, and she's now clawed back 5 of that. The issue is one of distribution.
Exactly.
Okay? The size of the state and public service provision is expanding by 5% over this parliament. It is like the biggest expansion we've seen in a couple of decades.
Listeners, if my sound has changed, it's because I'm an idiot who didn't charge her laptop properly and I had to plug back in and use the microphone on my laptop rather than my professional mic. So I apologize for poorer sound quality than you're accustomed to.
It's good. It's all a bit rustic,
Fine. This is how we roll, keeping it real over at Quiet Riot. What you've landed on is the legitimate argument to make, which is that this was a political choice. And it was a political choice to put the pain of the clawback of the 5 billion on the most vulnerable in society rather than those with the broadest shoulders. And that is a legitimate criticism that should be coming from progressive social democrats. And is the argument certainly being made by the Green Party, to a lesser extent the Liberal Democrats, though some of them have, and obviously SNP and Plaid and others will make the same point. And I guess that's the bit where Labour are going to struggle to hold together its July 2024 voter coalition. Best of Britain put out a poll this week asking, it was a YouGov poll, we asked people, do you think that we should be reaching our economic targets through, or would your preference be that the government pursued growing the economy through improving the trade deal with Europe or by cutting back disability benefits. And there was extraordinary support for one over the other.
Of course. I mean, it's a fucking no-brainer.
It's a fucking no-brainer.
But let's say they have a particular view of the politics of this that means they're finding it difficult to approach it. Even taking that into account, when you have added, as I said, 70 billion quid to the balance of payments, okay, to turn around and decide you need to claw back 5, all of it, 99.9% of it from health-related benefits, it's legitimate to say, what are you doing?
Absolutely. And what is it signaling and where is this taking us? And I think I know you and I have talked about the feel of this government is much more like a party that's been in power for 15 years and is running out of steam and energy and ideas and is falling out with itself, not a party less than a year into government with an enormous majority. This week we've seen Matthew Doyle quitting his comms director role in Number 10, which is kind of like the second big one to go after Sue Gray a few months ago, and a fracturing within the voter base that you wouldn't typically see this soon into a new and popular government. I'm really worrying about where the ideology, where the plan for the government lies. Now, people will say they're getting the pain out of the way early on so that they can start spending heavily in the second half of the parliament in the run-up to another election. But the world we are in at the moment, and we're going to talk about more of this in section 2, means that the volatility and the uncertainty and the headwinds that will come at you from different directions means you have far less control than ever before over, particularly once you're outside of the big powerhouse of the EU single market, means you are buffeted around so much more by external events that is a very, very big gamble to assume that there won't be some other thing that comes along and wallops this. I'm worried. I'm really worried about the popularity of this government as we gallop towards the next election. The winners from it at the moment seem to be Reform UK. That should concern all of us. And I think that will be preying on the minds of a lot of the backbenchers. Sort of every layer of the onion from Number 10 out is having problems, whether it's, within the cabinet. And I know that, we've heard from Lucy Powell, and there are rumours that Yvette Cooper is also very upset about these changes. So some really big heavy hitters in and around Starmer, losing staff from Number 10, losing support amongst the backbenchers, then amongst your voter base. And as you say, not even being able to keep the right-wing media on track with your right-wing agenda. I mean, I use that term as very, very shorthand for the government hoping that the right would be, as you say, patting them on the back for these changes. I don't know what they're thinking. That I can't follow the strand of thought that there is a strategy to this.
Yeah, maybe there isn't one. Maybe there isn't a strand of thought. Maybe it's just reactive, which is quite frightening, to be honest. I mean, look, I'm not going to weep tears, for the comms person going, to be honest. Because if you are in a situation where you're pumping 70 billion additional money into public services, into state spending, and you have backbenchers tweeting out, this is austerity 2.0, because of how you're distributing it and because of how poor your messaging is, then you have failed at the very basic level.
Quiet, riot. I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Quiet,
time passes, milestones are hit, demographics are annoyed, and we are getting to a stage, it feels like, where nothing but a major scalp could reset public perceptions. I think we are kind of at the point, or very close to the point, that unless either Rachel Reeves goes or Keir Starmer goes, the situation is sort of irretrievable in terms of how the public see you.
You could well be right, Alex. There have been obviously rumours for months about Rachel's position, and an enormous briefing campaign that happened a few months ago. And she's had an enormous amount of criticism, of course, for, inflating her CV and things like that, and the plagiarism in her book. Whether or not you believe any of that, and I'm sure there is an enormous load of misogyny in much of it, there is clearly a grouping close to the Prime Minister who are going down that train of thought and maybe, planning to push it even further. And you're right. I mean, I had an economist say to me yesterday, I think that we could even be headed for some kind of like Black Wednesday kind of moment. Things are so bad. And then, a minute later, I read an article in Bloomberg by Alex Wickham saying there's green shoots of recovery all over the place with the economy. This is going to work out fine. We just need to hold our nose for a bit longer.
Yeah.
And lots of, capital market investment people beginning to make very positive noises about the UK economy.
I don't think the economic news is bad at the moment at all. I think it's largely heading slowly and anemically, but in the right direction. And I do think that we are kind of at the point where the UK is a bargain investment-wise, where it has sufficient sort of stability, but is also cheap enough that it begins to look attractive. So I don't think that's the point. The point that the issue is, it's not her CV, it's none of that, it's her political choices. And I wonder, because we've discussed this before, right? My main issue was, who's doing this? Because the people that might be doing this are quite close to Reeves, but they're also close to Starmer. I'm trying to group the factions in my head and they don't quite work, right? So I wonder if they, if they are, and maybe the plan has been for several months, if they're lining up Rachel Reeves to do all the unpopular stuff and then get rid of her so that, most of the unhappiness can go attached to her.
Right, go on then. Put your money where your mouth is. In the hypothetical situation that she gets the boot, who do you think he'd make Chancellor?
I mean, look, my guess at any point up until 2 weeks ago would have been Darren Jones. I rate him as a communicator primarily, but also as a sort of finance person. But he has now shackled himself quite closely to Rachel Reeves over this week. And this may be viewed as loyalty and doing the right thing for the team, or it may be viewed as he's too close to her, basically. He's tainted by association. It might be someone completely new that is not even in the cabinet at the moment. Someone like, Diana Johnson, who has a vast amount of experience from chairing the Public Accounts Committee.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm a big fan of Darren's. I think he is a superb communicator and politician, but I fear for him now, as you mentioned, having been so closely associated with the Reeves project, that if you need to have a kind of root and branch clear out of her tenure, then it would be difficult to legitimately say he would represent a change of direction. I wouldn't be surprised if they elevated Wes Streeting.
Oh, Christ. As you know, I was a big fan of Wes Streeting when he was in opposition. in government, he just hasn't grown into the person actually in charge of the thing. He's still kind of the person looking at the thing from the other side. That might just be my impression. I haven't been paying a huge amount of attention, I have to say, to NHS reforms, but it is what it is. Let's leave people with one note of optimism, okay?
Okay.
I'm trying really hard here.
Go on, Alex. Scrape the barrel.
This vagueness about who's caught by it, what date it will come in, all of that stuff is an anxiety-inducing question, but it is also an opportunity. That if you press hard enough, make enough noise on the right sorts of things and in the right kind of direction, there is enough gray area there for the government to backtrack without it looking like it's doing a U-turn.
I think there will be a very large number of judicial reviews. And it will be at that point when they realise, oh God, this is actually going to cost us a hell of a lot of money and an enormous distraction. And it may be at that point that we see a U-turn.
I mean, I also weirdly, I get the impression from them that they don't want this stuff to ever come in. Do you get that vibe? I get that vibe. I get the vibe that they're hoping that, something will happen, like,
we'll find a pot of gold in the vaults of Bank of England.
There will be like a complete ceasefire in Ukraine that suddenly boosts European economies, or they will do a quick deal with the United States and be exempt from the tariffs that suddenly, boosts everything up by a couple of points, and they will never have to implement any of this. I really do get that vibe from them.
If that's their vibe, I mean, good luck to them, because we just don't sell enough to the US for that to change our economy by a couple of points, like maybe a 0.0 couple of points.
It's not about it's not about GDP size. It's about confidence and investment, inward investment and stuff like that. So you know what I mean. I know the market is very small, but there is a reputational halo to, if you manage to become like the one country in the world that Trump is not picking at.
Quiet Riot.
Get ready for Netflix's gripping new medical drama, Pulse. Set in a cutting-edge Miami trauma center, third-year resident Dr. Danny Sims is unexpectedly thrust into a promotion when beloved chief resident Dr. Xander Phillips gets suspended. Then, with the emotional and physical stakes at their highest, a storm will push the hospital and its residents to their limits. Witness how life can change in a heartbeat when you're operating under pressure. Watch Pulse April 3rd, only on Netflix.
Quiet Riot.
Alex, Trump is planning to impose a fresh round of trade tariffs on the 2nd of April, and he's calling that Liberation Day, or as I like to call it, here comes US Inflation Day. Economists are viewing this latest announcement as the culmination of the America First trade policy. So he signed an executive order on his first day in office aimed at revitalizing US manufacturing. Look, the US has wanted this for a really, really long time. There have been an enormous number of people within that country pushing that America First narrative for decades and decades and decades. They finally got their man, and he is delivering on it. He's heralding it as, quote, the big one, suggesting that the plans may be even more far-reaching than the import levies he's already unleashed on goods from abroad, such as the declaration on March the 26th of a 25% tariff on vehicles and automotive parts imported into the USA. Now, this weekend, as we're recording, UK ministers and senior officials are holding talks with US counterparts to try and secure a last-ditch carve-out for the UK. So our government is seeking an exemption to those car tariffs and the wider package of measures Trump is drawing up for next week as part of its plan for a US-UK economic prosperity deal not a US-UK trade deal, an economic prosperity deal. And the UK is one of 4 countries, it's been reported, alongside Australia, Japan, and South Korea, that are this weekend engaged in these intensive negotiations to secure exemptions before the deadline. It's not looking likely that they'll meet the deadline. And Jonathan Reynolds, Business Secretary, is out saying, look, we're working on it really, really hard, but absolutely no promises that we'll get it done in time for avoiding that 2nd of April deadline. Alex, in all of that, the concerns, of course, are that the government is going to be offering up some pretty big concessions to the USA, potentially unnecessarily, when Trump's package of tariffs is set to be narrower than feared, and that perhaps the UK was never really a target for them. We know that Trump thinks in terms of the major economic blocs, and he sees that as the EU, China, and North America. So, he's really trying to punish the EU because we're a minnow. Ministers, it's reported, have offered up the £800 million digital services tax, which targets US tech companies as part of the talks for this economic deal. Is that wise or potentially a dangerous gamble?
I think I'm going to annoy you.
You're going to say it's wise.
I'm going to say it's wise. I've vacillated on this and I've thought about it long and hard. And let me explain why I think it's wise. This kind of tax only works if it's coordinated along a number of big blocks and markets, right? So this kind of tax, with Biden in the White House applying similar sorts of regulations, similar tax imposition to companies over there, and the EU doing the same on the other side, it made sense. With Trump in the White House, providing effectively a haven for these companies, these services are so mobile and so easy to relocate and say, my servers are now in Texas, my servers are now in Malaysia, that it doesn't make any sense for the UK on its own in the current environment. I still think it's a sensible thing, but I do think it's a thing that requires international coordination. And without America on board, and America is not on board anymore, it makes zero sense for a small market like the UK to say, we're going to put this tax on you, because they will just provide the same services via runaround.
So I think that we're a minnow. I think we're a minnow that has pissed him off. Let's not forget, Labour people in their tens, dozens, maybe even hundreds, went to campaign for Kamala Harris, and Trump will not forget that. He is such a bitter man that will be the one thing he will forever remember about Keir Starmer.
Yeah, I have to disagree. I think Trump enjoys sort of loyalty basically more than anything, except one thing, which is a reversal of loyalty. So he really enjoys having people like Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance in his team that have said really nasty shit about him before. He really enjoys having people basically kissing the ring that he knows dislike him. So I genuinely think when it comes to that kind of relationship, he lives in the moment.
Maybe, but I just come back to the negotiating positions of EU and Canada just having far greater economic leverage than we do. And post-Brexit, we do lack the same clout. And I just think he's got very little incentive to offer us special treatment. You might be right. It may be purely on ego rather than bottom line that he makes the decision. And as you say, on some kind of reverse ferret loyalty. So here's my anxiety. It's that we are...
Just the one.
Indeed. We are very close now, less than 2 months away from the big EU-UK reset. And anyone who follows Best for Britain will know that we are pushing incredibly hard for what we call beneficial alignment. So basically aligning our regulatory framework with the EU's, because that is where we sell the vast majority of our goods and services, and that we can get up to 2.2% GDP growth if we do that all within the government's red lines. Our moment for knowing whether or not that was the direction of travel for the Labour government to go that bit further than just doing a veterinary agreement, an SPS agreement that doesn't really do anything at all for UK GDP. We thought the 19th of May really represented the moment when we'll find out whether or not that's going to happen. As things stand now, trade looks to be at risk from defence and security being the prevailing issue that gets talked about at that summit and in and around all of the negotiations around the reset. I can't think of a time in history when you started with the defence and security stuff and ended up working backwards toward trade. Normally, in the course of history, countries begin to trade together. They then have that mutual benefit of that close relationship of exchanging goods and labour and capital and blah, blah, blah. And from there, you then begin to integrate and ally with each other on issues of defence and security. So that is causing me quite a bit of concern at the moment. And when it comes to defence and security, you've really only got France and the UK that have got the major military heft. And that then is all about procurement and where are you buying your arms from and who is producing them and what are the rules of origin of that. And so when you're not in a single market, very, very little incentive, particularly for the French, to cut us in on that kind of an arrangement. And then you think about the UK's military in and of itself, and it is a pale comparison to that of our historical levels. We've got more admirals than we've got vessels. You could put one admiral in charge of one ship and still have a lot of admirals left over. We've got more horses in the British Army than we've got tanks. So even our negotiating power within the defence and security stuff is much diminished after years and years of austerity cutting back on British military power. And so what we really are going to need is a hell of a lot of goodwill from Europe to cut us in on all of this. And I want the UK to be at the heart of the European project, of that understanding that we have overly relied on the US for far too long on our military capability and defense, and to come to our rescue if something really terrible were to happen. That is the reality. That is the situation we find ourselves in. I think that is the new normal now. I think the post-war consensus has completely broken down on that front. And the goodwill extraction from Europe is dependent on us committing to that project. And that does mean signalling to Europe, at least, that we are prioritizing them over Trump. And I think what you said is at the crux of it. How coordinated is the move to allow the UK to be this broker between the two parties? Do the European leaders from Ursula von der Leyen to Macron to Friedrich Merz agree and have kind of bought into the, okay, Stelma, you can, be a bit two-faced on this because we get it and we know. And fundamentally, I don't know that I trust that is what is happening, or that I trust Starmer and his government to be doing that effectively. So thank you for your optimism and saying that it is wise. And I'm sorry to explain why I think it's actually too much of a gamble at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, look, what you're describing is the pursuit of a sort of wider economic deal with the US. It's not about whether the digital services tax is a sensible chip to put on the table. Unless we agree a deal, it's not going to change hands, as it were, the chip. I was just commenting on whether that is a reasonable thing to be putting on the table, and I think it is, that's all. I wasn't commenting on the wisdom of pursuing an economic deal with the US while still trying to basically be pally with Europe, which I agree with you. It's fraught with difficulty, but so is the other way. There are no good options at the moment. There are no easy solutions at the moment. Like, I can see a situation where if we turned around and went, fine, forget the US, let's just talk to Europe, and Trump turned around and put all tariffs and max on us, we would be in a situation where we took the economic hit, minor as it is, because we don't sell that many goods into the US. Basically, we are trying to balance the relationship that we have with the European Union with trying to do some sort of deal with the US that exempts us from tariffs, which might be quite beneficial for the European Union, seeing as there is a land border in Northern Ireland, and that area is very, very grey at the moment. So there may be a certain level of forbearance, there may be a certain level of acceptance that will go on for another month or so. But I agree with you that the time will come when we will have to decide.
And on that, I have a call to action. Can I tell our listeners what they can do about all of it? So the 19th of May is a huge moment, and your MP needs to know that you want them to prioritize the deal with Europe, because that deal will shield the UK entirely from any negative impact of US tariffs, and it reduces the EU's exposure by about a third. So it's win-win all round. It could have a totally game-changing impact on UK GDP. And so what I want you all to do is to go to heymp.uk. So that's HEY-MP.uk. And we will, what that does, and this is a Best of Britain product, you put your postcode in, and instead of sending one of those generic campaign emails to your MP, and they all look exactly the same, and they're clearly coming from the same email address, and they can kind of be bundled up and put in a folder, and the MP may or may not get round to replying, it opens up your own email account, your own email client, so your Gmail or your Hotmail or your Macmail or whatever it is. And so it looks like a standalone email coming into their inbox. And all it's doing is asking them to read the growth report that Frontier Economics did for Best Britain, and to use their influence to push government ahead of the summit to go for the beneficial alignment. So we'll leave a link in the show notes to that. I don't care if you sent it before, do it again. It is so important because the timing is right now, and this is the moment to have the pressure applied through Parliament on that Ursula von der Leyen Starmer summit in a couple of months' time.
Yeah, sounds good.
Quiet riot.
Now, we also, while we're talking about America, we cannot not mention the Vance visit to Greenland. Alex, how do you think it went for him?
I mean, when your ex shows up at your house party and everyone is like, who the fuck invited them? It was basically that, wasn't it?
Well, no one invited them, and they only were able to go because they've got their military base there. Yeah,
so, and then he gave this big speech where he was telling Greenlanders that they sort of weren't managing their country well enough. And it's like, who are you? What is your stakeholder status here? Exactly. I mean, other than basically threatening you're going to take Greenland over.
Yeah.
Because that was the gist of it, wasn't it?
Very much. I mean, absolutely no quibble about it. You don't know how to run your own country. You need to let us, and try to cash in on the anti-Danish Colonial wrote.
Yeah, and at the same time, they're putting out, have you seen the adverts? They're putting out those really emotional ads all over Greenland on, I guess, social media that are along the lines of America stands with Greenland. They're really trying.
In 1943, nearly 1,000 American soldiers with 4 chaplains set sail from New York to Greenland, carrying with them hope, duty, and a quiet fear. But their ship was torpedoed by a Nazi U-boat, and the frigid waters of the North Atlantic became a grave. Those 4 chaplains gave up their life vests, giving their lives so that others might live, to protect America and Greenland. Their sacrifices helped win our freedom, and we will never forget. Together, Americans and Greenlanders stood as sentinels at the top of the world. But today, Greenland faces new threats, from Russian aggression and Chinese expansion. Our shared legacy lives on in every joint mission, every Arctic patrol, every partnership forged in the shadow of melting ice and rising tensions. This is not just history, it is destiny. Now is the time to stand together again. For peace, for security, for the future, America stands with Greenland.
This sort of idea that Europe is not with you, we're with you, to kind of try and shift perceptions. And I mean, I have to tell you, like, I've seen a lot of Vox Pops, and none of them were good. Like, they are moving opinion in the opposite direction. I think there was something like 3 points more support for a possible independence and then an arrangement with the US 2 months ago, before they even said anything, than there is today.
It's extraordinary. And if I was Denmark, I would have not let them in. And no, we control our borders, fuck off. But I guess they can't when there is this US military
well,
base
because
there
that will play into that, that
exactly.
will play into that wedge, that division.
And he got off the plane and he started moaning about how cold it was. I was like, where did you think you were going, you idiot?
I mean, the whole thing, I thought, was utterly bizarre and very, very worrying. Because, there was a time when conventional wisdom was like, it's just Trump. He says rubbish like that and then forgets about it 2 days later. But Greenland is not in that category, right?
Oh, no, he's quite upset.
He has been talking about it every week since he was elected, and they're now doing like official visits and stuff like that and putting out advertising.
Yep.
So this isn't some sort of
brain fart. It's a campaign.
Fart.
Yeah,
it's a campaign
with decent money behind it too.
That is the sort of stuff Europe needs to be reacting to.
Quiet Riot.
And that's it for this week's Sunday School. Thank you, Naomi, and thank you everyone at home for tuning in. As we mentioned on the main show, our next live Zoom call, our sort of Ask Us Anything for our coffee backers, is coming up very, very soon. So make sure you're signed up as a monthly supporter via ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod if you want to be invited along to that with us and Kenny. And you can honestly ask us anything you want to. We just don't promise to answer the really rude. Actually, I promise to answer the really rude ones. I can't promise to answer the boring ones.
And don't forget to leave us a review, visit our bookshop, and share your favorite episode with a friend so that we can grow the Quiet Riot community and keep this show pumping into your ears on the regular.
We'll be back very soon with another cameo from Vicky Price. As you heard teased, we talked about tariffs and how the US economy is doing and how all that will play out. But in the meantime, keep on writing, but quietly.
We love you lots. Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangita. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot.